Guys, welcome back after our advert break. Let us now look at an elevation map. Okay, so the question at hand says the following. The Cape Argus Cycle Tour is an annual cycle race hosted in Cape Town, South Africa. Study the elevation map of this cycle race to answer the question that follow. Now let's do exactly that. Let's see what is the map all about. So here is the heading, right? The title says Cape Argus Cycle Race. It indicates here it's an elevation map. Here, on my y-axis, right, my dependent axis, I have the height above sea level. And again, that's indicated in meters. And then here we have the start of the cycle race, right, which is at 0 kilometers. And then we have the finish here, okay? And in between, we also see that distances and names of places are indicated to us. Right? What is important with this elevation map is where we see our uphills and our downhills, for example. Guys, are we clear? So now let's look at our first question. Question number 1A, it says determine the total distance of this cycle race. So the total distance, remember we said this is our starting point and this is where we will finish. Now, if I look at the distance here, so I started at 0 kilometers per hour, or 0 kilometers, so the end will then be 109 kilometers. So the total distance, therefore, equals 109 kilometers. All right, so that is how long this race will be. Guys, are we clear? The total distance of the cycle race, 109 kilometers. Moving on now to our next question, 1B. It says, identify the height of the highest point in this race. All right, we can see there are quite a few of higher points, but we are looking for the highest point there. Okay, so I'm sure you'll agree this is the highest point in the race. Okay, and it says identify the height of the... Okay, so now I'll move across to my left-hand side to see... Okay, then it indicates that the highest point, the height of the highest point, equals 180 meters above sea level. Guy, are we clear? Right, the highest point, the height of the highest point, 180 meters above sea level. All right, I will now be looking at question number C. It says, at what point in the race do the cyclists ride very close to the sea? Right, remember this from here is above sea level, right? So moving here downwards to sea level, right? So at what point in this race do the cyclists ride very close to the sea? So we must find the closest point at the bottom, right? Okay, so we'll agree it's here, right? That's the closest, right? Because from this point upwards here, it's above the sea level, right? So therefore, I'm sure you'll agree that at Noordhoek, that's the point where these riders are closest to the sea. So we can basically say about 60 or 76 kilometers into this race, right? So at Noordhoek, or I can also say about 76 kilometers into this race. Let me write it proper. So 76 kilometers into the cycle race. Guys, are we fine with that one? All right, I'll now be looking at question number D. Number D says, determine the longest downhill in meters of the race. So the longest downhill, right? So that's the highest point, and I can see this will definitely be the longest downhill all the way to this point here. Guys, are we fine? So where do we start with the longest downhill? At 180 meters, right? So it will go all the way down to, can we see here, approximately, if I go to my left-hand side, 10 meters above sea level. So I'll say minus 10 meters. So this downhill here, the longest downhill in meters is 170 meters. Guys, are we fine? I'll do that again. Remember, I've identified the longest downhill, and then I had to indicate what is that in meters, right? The longest downhill. of this specific cycle race. So I started at the highest point here of this downhill, which is 180 meters. Now look, where's the lowest point? Till where does this downhill stop before we start with an incline again? Right, so I note here it's at 10 meters. So the difference then between 180 and 10 equals 170 meters. So that's the longest downhill. All right, question number E. If you were cycling the Cape Town cycle race, do you think the race would be easy? Right? Explain your answer by referring to this elevation map. So looking at the elevation map, do you think this is easy? Right, for me, I would say it will definitely be challenging. Right? Not easy, because if you look, there are quite a number of uphills. Right, can you see? So here, it's an uphill, there's an uphill, here, and so on. And we can see some of them, they are very steep, and we can say they are very long as well, so it covers a long distance as well. Okay, so in my opinion, this won't be an easy race, right? It will be challenging because of the many uphills that we see, and we can see it's quite steep, and in some cases it's also a long uphill. All right, so that's in my opinion. I would think it won't be that easy. Right, I will now look at question number F. Question number F says, approximately by how many meters do the riders drop in elevation from the top to the bottom of Smitswinkel Hill? Right, so approximately by how many meters do the riders drop in elevation, right, from the top to the bottom of Smitswinkel Hill. Now let's find Smitswinkel Hill, right? Can you see here? Smitswinkel Hill. Here. Can you see there? Okay. So basically we want to know by how many meters will they basically from here drop all the way here. So from A to B. That's actually what we are saying there. The top of Smitswinkel Hill to the bottom, which is there at B. Guys, are we still fine? So by how many meters? So when they're at the highest point, they are approximately at 150 meters above sea level. We agree. Then they will drop all the way down to here. Can we see? Now I'll go to the left and I look. That will be around about 50 meters. Guys, are we still following? The top to the bottom. Right, so by how many meters do the riders drop then at this specific point in the race? So they will drop by approximately 100 meters. Okay, so the decline basically will be approximately 100 meters. Guys, are we clear? All right, let's look at our next question. Question number G. It says, determine the distance in kilometers. Right, so now we're looking at distance. In this time around, we are working with kilometers, not meters, right? From the top to the bottom of Smitswinkel Hill. So we are still at the same point of interest, which is what? I agree, Smitswinkel Hill. We are still here. Okay? So now we need to find, okay? So the distance. So when they're at the top, can you see here it says top of Smitswinkel Hill. The top of it is plus minus 50 kilometers into the race, right? Then it's going to drop right to here B. Okay, so we want to know, determine the distance this time in kilometers from the top to the bottom. So from here to there. So actually, how long, or what's the space it will take for when they decline? That's actually what we are looking at. So how many kilometers will that decline basically covers, right? So if I look, B will be roughly here. So if that's 55, right? Okay, so the difference then, so that if that is 50, it will move to 55 kilometers, right? So the distance, when they take this decline from the top to the bottom, basically, is then plus minus 5 kilometers. Guys, are we clear on that? So when they start here on top, when they're at the highest point, right, of Smitswinkel Hill, they will then take a decline going downwards, downhill basically, right, till they round about at 55 kilometers. So the question is asking, determine the distance in kilometers from the top to the bottom of Smithswinkel Hill. So the distance from the top to the bottom of Smithswinkel Hill is then 5 kilometers. Guys, let us take a quick advert break. After the break, I'll wrap up today's lesson. See you after the break.